Welcome to B'nai Abraham Chabad, and welcome to the bright side. We begin with a prayer, Psalm 130. Shir Amalois mimamakim krasicha Adinoi, Adinoi shima v'koili, tiena oznecha kashuvois l'kol tachnunoi, im avoinois tishmar yo Adinoi miyamoit, ki imcha aslicha l'man tivorei, ki visi Adinoi kivso nafshi v'lidvorei hecholti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishoimrim laboiker, shoimrim laboiker, Yachel Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai hachesed v'harbe imoi fudus, v'hu yiftes Yisrael mikoil avonosav. A song of ascents, out of the depths I call to you, O Lord. My Lord, hearken to my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the sound of my pleas. God, if you were to preserve iniquities, my Lord, who could survive? But forgiveness is with you, that you may be held in awe. I hope in the Lord. My soul hopes, and I long for his word. My soul yearns for the Lord more than those awaiting the morning wait for the morning. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is kindness. With him there is abounding deliverance, and he will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. Join me in the mitzvah of tzedakah. We've been talking about this idea of positive thinking, and again, based on this book that we're reading called Positivity Bias. And last week we told the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, the great leader of 19th century Jewry back in Russia, who advised his follower to think good and it will be good. The question has been asked, isn't this approach a dangerous one? After all, if I visualize a positive outcome and result, and that doesn't materialize, isn't this setting us up for major disappointment? In fact, some scientists have pushed back against positive thinking. And they claim that if a person focuses exclusively on the best possible outcome of a particular challenge, they'll be disappointed with failed expectations. An article in Scientific American suggested that it's better to imagine the worst possible scenario rather than the best one, because then you'll never be let down. But the principle of thinking good, thinking positively, is an integral part of our belief system. And so the question is, what is this idea based on? The Rebbe discussed both the psychological as well as the spiritual dynamic at play, and asked the obvious question, on what basis am I suggesting that we think good, we have a positive mindset and optimistic thinking in the face of real challenges? All of us are going through real challenges, and isn't it presumptuous to assume that in every given situation, no matter what, we are deserving of divine grace? Who knows? Maybe we don't deserve it. Maybe our behavior is not righteous enough. And so the Rebbe explained that when a person places their faith and trust in God, trusting that the temporary crisis they're in will be resolved in a favorable manner, they have in effect risen above their own nature. It's not natural to think positive when faced with a bleak reality. But when a person pushes themselves to think positively, what happens is that they then receive a reciprocal response from God, where God understands how difficult, how supernatural it is for a person to focus on the positive in the face of serious challenges. and to unequivocally place their trust in God. And so as a result, perhaps even as a reward for the person's extraordinary faith and the act itself of thinking positively, the person who may otherwise be undeserving of a positive outcome in their life is now deserving of an extra measure of divine generosity as reward for their placing their trust in God. In other words, positive thinking does not just help us manage or react to our reality. It literally helps to shape and create a new reality. And here's an example of this dynamic at play. The year was 1957, and a young man from Israel was studying in yeshiva in New York. He receives a letter from home saying that his father is gravely ill. His father suffered a heart attack and is in critical condition. At those times when overseas phone calls were prohibitively expensive, communication was not like it is today, the young man was very shaken by this news and started having all kinds of negative thoughts, even picturing in his mind, imagining that, God forbid, his father may not even be alive anymore. As he's thinking these depressing thoughts, he writes a letter to the Rebbe. And he explains the situation, ending with the words, "I don't even know what to think at this point." And the Rebbe responded, saying, "I was shocked by your words, 'I don't even know what to think.' Haven't you heard the instruction of our sages to think positively? Tracht gut, wird sein gut. Think good, and the outcome will be good. I await good news." A few tense, difficult days passed by, and finally, the young man was able to reach his mother by phone and asked, "How's father?" His mother gave him the good news that his father was out of danger. Thank God. When did it happen? It happened Thursday night. After hanging up the phone, the young man went to 770, to the Rebbe's synagogue. And on his way out of the synagogue, the Rebbe turned to this young man and asked him for an update. Any news with your father? The young man was happy to report that yes, his father was out of danger. When did this happen? The Rebbe said. Thursday night. And when did you start thinking good? Thursday evening. The Rebbe said, may such things never happen again. But you must always remember to think positively. And so from a psychological view alone, there may be a risk or a downside to always thinking positively. Because you might say, I'm setting myself up for a massive letdown. Things don't always work out in the way we want them to. But from the spiritual perspective, from the perspective of faith, the exact opposite is true. Because whether we realize it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not, our own destiny, our own reality, is shaped, is molded in relation to the level of faith and the positivity of our thoughts that we have. So thinking positively, placing our trust in God, is actually a way to create a vehicle for God's salvation, for a miracle to happen, even if it was not meant to be, for that situation to be transformed to a positive outcome. Our guest today is Dr. David Zwillenberg, a clinical professor at Drexel University and practicing physician at St. Christopher's Hospital for Children. So David, welcome to the Bright Side program, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you do as a doctor, what you specialize in?
Sure. I specialize in pediatric otolaryngology, that's ear, nose, and throat, taking care of kids. And I practice at St. Christopher's, which is a non-denominational hospital located in the second poorest congressional district in the country. We take care mostly of poor children.
Do you also teach at Drexel University?
I do.
Tell us how you've been impacted by this pandemic, how your practice has been affected. Everybody's been affected on some level. So what's been going on in your world over the last couple of months?
It's been actually very interesting, and I'll say this is probably a peculiar thing to say, but it's been a particular privilege actually to still be practicing during these times. So initially there was a lot of fear. There's still a lot of fear of this disease. Interestingly, it doesn't much affect children. So we cleaned out the hospital to be ready to take all kinds of ill people, and we actually shut down before the state shut down. We closed to elective surgery and to elective admissions pretty early. And then it turned out that we've had, oh, thank God, almost no sick children, and which is a similar experience to other pediatric hospitals. And the idea of closing down was so that we would be able to, first of all, if there were sick children, we were able to take care of them. And then when it became clearer that there would be relatively few very ill children, we assumed that we would be taking care of adults either with COVID or non-COVID illnesses for whom there was no room in other hospitals. And that, it turned out, Philadelphia, thank God, was largely spared. We actually never had to do that. So what happened is we cleaned the place out. We prepared for a huge influx of patients that pretty much never came. And at this point, we're actually trying to gear back up to start providing routine care that hasn't been delivered, but patients are reluctant to come in. What we fear as the next move is that there'll be epidemics of preventable diseases that people are not getting their shots for, that are not getting taken care of, but people are reluctant to come in. But as I say, it's been a very interesting intellectual time. There was a wall at Jefferson where I used to teach that was all plaques, like at a shul, memorial plaques, and every one of them said it was like in memory of Dr. John Smith, who died in the great influenza epidemic of 1918-1919, in memory of Dr. So-and-so, who died building the Panama Canal, in memory of Dr. So-and-so, who died of yellow fever or malaria or, all kinds of diseases. There's a whole wall of these plaques. And one of the things that's been interesting is the reactions of the medical personnel, most doctors and nurses and ancillary personnel came into work every day because this is what they signed on for. And this risk was a risk that they knew about when they decided that this is what they were going to do. And I think that for many people, it was a remarkable manifestation of responsibility and faith, if you will.
And we certainly want to add our appreciation to you and the others who are on the front lines, bringing healing to the patients in the community, to our society. But you mentioned faith, and I'm curious how faith intersects with your medical practice. Of course, as Jews, we believe that God is the ultimate healer, and yet Judaism encourages people to take care of their bodies by visiting the doctors and getting the best medical care possible. So how do these two ideas of faith in God as the healer of all flesh, and going to a doctor, putting your faith in the hands of a human being, how do these two ideas come together in your mind?
When I was a resident, one of my attending physicians told me that doctors never actually cure anything. When we treat pneumonia with antibiotics, the pneumonia goes away, but the patient is left with a scar in his lung. That we never actually fix anything. Everything we do leaves a mark on the person. And that every illness leaves a scar, whether it's mental or physical, whatever. Everything leaves a mark. We treat illness, but we're mostly just odd setters. You know, we can tell you that 80% of people with this given tumor will be cured, survive at 8 years, survive at 5 years. But we don't really know anything. When you tell somebody that they have an 80% chance of survival at 5 years, that only means that 80% of people with the same disease will be alive at 5 years. You can't tell anybody, for each individual person, it's a 50%. You're either going to be alive or you're going to be dead. The individual prognosis is absolutely not visible to us. We just play odds. It's a gamble, and to a certain extent, as you're not a gambling man and neither am I, you know, you have to be a fool to gamble. But that's what we are. We don't determine anything.
So the role of the doctor is not necessarily to make predictions, but rather to treat the illness to the best of their ability, and hope that the patient, through their faith and trust in God, will survive.
That's right, and we don't know who is going to and who is not. The only thing you can do is shift the needle a little bit. What ultimately happens is not up to us at all.
Given that we know the importance of a positive attitude, when a patient or the caregivers, many times you're treating pediatrics, so you see the parents who are bringing the children in, and when they're feeling optimistic, projecting a sense of calm and confidence, and not as anxious or fearful. I'm curious. So one of the things that we've been talking about here is the importance of developing a positive attitude. And I'm wondering if in your experience, you've seen an impact on the patient or the family's attitude and mindset to their physical healing.
As you know, there's been a fair amount of evidence that prayer, tefillah, even remote, does have an influence on how people do. We don't really understand that, and it's inherently illogical. But then life is not logical. People feel better and feel happier if they're not afraid. And fear in itself is a disabling condition that often interferes with medical treatment and with life in general. I mean, hope is a survival technique, if you will. You know, what scientists, I guess, call, or psychologists call, a good death is often related to feeling like it's a good life. People who are complete in the COMPLEAT are generally not only mentally but physically healthier and certainly easier to treat as patients and more content as people.
So find a good doctor, pray to God, strengthen your faith and trust in God, and then the doctor will be God's agent to bring you the healing you need. There's no reason for fear and anxiety. Do you agree with that?
Optimally, I agree with that. I think that one of the things that's been manifested to me through all of this is that there's a genuine feeling that we're doing God's work, and I use God in this sense with either a small or a large G. I mean, whatever religion you are, the people involved in care during this time in particular feel that they're doing, they're taking care of Yitzirei Kapecha. And it's a mitzvah in a religious sense, and also in a non-religious sense. It's what in English would be called a calling, holy work.
Okay. So now my most important question: in every challenge in life, if you look deep enough, you'll find the bright side. You'll find a silver lining in the experience that we can learn from. What has been the bright side for you, or what bright side have you noticed in the pandemic that we can take with us as we go back to the new normal?
It would be presumptuous of me to say what others can take from it. But I want to reiterate some of the things I said earlier. One is that it's been, I'm kind of at the tail end of my career here. I've been doing this 40 years now since I graduated medical school. So it's been a privilege to actually go through this as a practicing physician. I learned a lot about the people I work with and about a new disease and a new way of dealing with things. I've been through other epidemic diseases, AIDS, SARS, MERS, swine flu, all kinds of stuff, but nothing quite like this. And so it was a very interesting experience for me personally. And it was interesting to watch how other people in medicine dealt with it. There's been a lot of sincerity. You see a lot of people really trying very hard to do the best they could. I think there has been some deliberate flouting of rules for a variety of reasons. The Jewish community here in Philadelphia the Frum community has mostly done the right thing. Shuls closed down for the right reasons. Lo tamod al damayecha, and all those things. We did the right things. It hasn't been universally true across the United States, but it's been true in Philadelphia. There's been a lot of chizuk, a lot of people supporting each other and doing very well. I think there's been tremendous losses of old people because there hasn't been Shiva and there haven't been a lot of observances. I don't think many people are aware of that. It has been a tremendous learning experience, and it's been inspiring how people reacted to it and have acted.
So you've seen the resilience of a community and a society going through this and doing the best. Everyone's doing the best they can to mitigate the risk of themselves and others from coming into contact with this virus, and doing what we can to protect each other.
Yes, and I think also it's people are not aware of how deep the volunteerism has been. How many people have done things personally without looking for kavod or reward of any sort. How many people have done things to help others? It's really pretty remarkable. What you see, the amount of the effort, the number of people, the sheer number of individuals who've really extended themselves to help their neighbors. It's remarkable.
So that's definitely a bright side that we need to hold on to and continue even after the crisis has passed.
For sure.
To realize that we're all in this together and we're all responsible for each other. And
Yep.
we have to look out for each other to the best of our ability. Well, thank you for sharing your experience, and God willing, you'll be back to full capacity soon, bringing more healing and most of all, preventive healing to your patients. That's the most important healing to do, preventive.
That's right. Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best, David. Take care.
Regards. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on the Bright Side program. If you enjoyed this program, we ask that you consider even a small contribution to B'nai Abraham Chabad to help these programs continue. I want to thank our sponsors for making this possible and wish you a wonderful week.